Hello, pre-K kiddos. Miss Erin and I miss you so much. We're shivering here. Our room is cold, just as usual. I hope that you're warm at home. Miss Erin and I have been staying home a lot, just like you, to take care of our families, just like your family is taking care of you. But just because we're not with you doesn't mean we're not still a class. So we wanted to show you some fun things that you can do at home, or you can not do. You can just look at our beautiful, happy faces, and maybe that will make your heart feel warm. But we want you to know that we're praying for you, like when someone's absent from our class, and I say, God, please help this person know that we love them and miss them. That's what we're praying for you, and we'll all be okay and see each other again soon. Right, so I have a book to read to you today, and today is St. Patrick's Day while we're making this video. It might not be St. Patrick's Day when you're watching it, but I like to read this book on St. Patrick's Day because it's about an Irish couple, Mr. and Mrs. OGrady, and there are potatoes in this book, and potatoes are very Irishy. So here we go. One potato, two potato. Mr. and Mrs. OGrady lived alone on a bare and rocky hillside. Their children had grown up a long time ago and gone out into the great, wide world to seek their fortunes. Just like the three little pigs, huh? But Mr. and Mrs. OGrady stayed behind in their cottage, where they didn't have much stuff, and they shared everything. Mr. and Mrs. OGrady were so poor that they dug one potato from their little garden every day, ate it for breakfast, lunch, and supper, and they thought they were very lucky to have it. And there they are in their garden. They were so skinny that they could sit side by side on just one chair to eat their meal, and it was a good thing, too, because they only had one chair. Mrs. OGrady had only one hairpin. Together they had one blanket full of holes and one raggedy coat. They took turns wearing it in the winter. They had just one candle, which they never burned. Every night when the sun went down and darkness was close, Mrs. OGrady pretended to light the candle. And every morning when the sun rose and light filled their little house, she pretended to blow out the candle. They had one gold coin, which they were saving for a rainy day, and which they kept tucked under the straw of their bed. Now, Mr. OGrady was as fine a husband as Mrs. OGrady could ever have wanted, but it was the one wish of her heart to have a friend, someone with whom she could share recipes for boiled potatoes and sweet memories of how it felt to touch her newborn baby's soft little heads. What do you like to talk about with your friends? To be sure, Mrs. OGrady was the finest wife Mr. OGrady could imagine, but he too wanted his own friend, someone with whom he could talk about potato weevils and root rot. It's all about potatoes. One day, Mr. OGrady was out digging in the potato patch for their dinner, as he did every day. To his dismay, he saw that he had come to the very last potato in the very last row of the garden. Hoping he had somehow missed one, he dug a wee bit deeper. What was this? It was harder than a potato, bigger than a potato, blacker than a potato. Why, it wasn't a potato, it was a pot. Mr. OGrady was quite surprised that he had never come across it before in that tiny garden, and he wanted to show the curious object to his wife. Since it was heavy and he needed both hands to carry it, he put the last potato into the pot and started for home. Mrs. OGrady, come quickly, he called. Mrs. OGrady rushed to the door. What have you got there, husband? Well, said Mr. OGrady, setting the pot on the floor, it's a pot. Aye, so it is, said Mrs. OGrady, but it's much too big for cooking. Well, so far it's come in handy for carrying our last potato home, he said. Our last potato? Said Mrs. OGrady. Saints have mercy! Whatever will we do? She leaned over the pot to reach for the potato. As she did, her one hairpin fell out of her hair and into the pot. She didn't pay attention much, though, because inside the pot were 2 potatoes. She held them up. Husband, she scolded, don't joke about there being only 1 potato. There are 2 here. But I wasn't joking, said Mr. OGrady, very puzzled by the sight of the second potato. I only put 1 potato into the pot. Mrs. OGrady smiled. And only 1 hairpin fell into the pot. I suppose that now I'll reach in and find 2 hairpins. She reached into the pot and her face grew pale. When she took out her hands, they held not 1 but 2 hairpins, exactly alike. Husband, how can this be? She whispered. Mr. OGrady took one of the hairpins and threw it into the pot. Quickly, he reached back in and pulled out 2 hairpins. Now I have 3 hairpins instead of 1, Mrs. OGrady said. Happily, she began arranging her hair. Mr. OGrady said, Wife, think. Surely this pot is magic. If it made another potato and 2 more hairpins, what do you think would happen if we put in our candle? What do you think will happen? Mrs. OGrady ran to get the candle and tossed it into the pot. Sure enough, she pulled out 2 candles so exactly alike that one couldn't tell the old one from the new. Next, Mr. OGrady put their coat into the pot. Guess what happened? Out came another coat, as raggedy and torn as the first. Then went in the blanket, and out came 2 blankets, with holes in the exact same places. Mrs. OGrady hugged her husband. Oh, now we will both be warm this winter, she said. Mr. OGrady took 2 potatoes, placed them in the pot, and pulled out 4. He threw 4 into the pot and took out 8. And guess what? When he put in the 8 potatoes, 16 potatoes were waiting to be pulled out. Soon the OGradys had enough potatoes for a feast. Mrs. OGrady made herself a whole set of new hairpins and enough candles to light their nights through the darkest winter. Mr. OGrady tried to put the chair into the pot, but it didn't quite fit. It's okay, he said. 1 chair has been good enough for us for a long time. But Mrs. OGrady, who was a clever woman, had been thinking. She went over to the mattress and with trembling fingers took out the gold coin. Husband, she said, do you suppose the pot's magic will work on this? Holding her breath, she tossed the coin into the pot. That 1 coin became 2, then 2 became 4, and 4 became 8, and 8 became 16, and soon the floor was covered with bright gold coins. Mr. OGrady put lots of the coins into his pocket. Wife, he said, I am going to the village to buy you a new coat, a new blanket, and even a new chair. Mrs. OGrady said goodbye to her husband. She put the potatoes into a sack. She gathered up the coins and placed them under the mattress. Then she went outside, where she found a single flower growing on a bare and rocky hillside. Soon, guess what? She had a bouquet full of flowers just like it. Tired out from all the excitement, Mrs. OGrady wrapped herself in both blankets and took a nap. She was awakened by her husband's cheerful whistle as he came through the door, his arms filled with packages. I wonder what he has. Excited to see what he had brought, Mrs. OGrady ran to meet him. She tripped and fell. What do you think will happen, Miss Erin?
I think she's going to go into the pot.
I think she's going into the pot. And landed head first, right in the pot. Help me out of here, husband, she cried. Packages flew through the air as Mr. OGrady raced over to the pot. There were his wife's skinny little legs sticking out at the top, kicking back and forth. Oh no. What do you think will happen? Mr. OGrady grabbed on tightly, pulled poor old Mrs. OGrady out of the pot, and set her gently on the floor. But now guess what? Now there were 2 more skinny little legs kicking back and forth. Without thinking, Mr. OGrady reached into the pot, grabbed those skinny little legs, and pulled out another Mrs. OGrady, so exactly like his first wife that he could scarcely tell the difference. Oh dear, said Mr. OGrady, one wife is all I ever wanted. What should they do? When the first Mrs. OGrady had recovered from her surprise, she smiled and said, "There's only one thing to be done." Mr. OGrady pointed to the second Mrs. OGrady. "Throw her back in?" "No," said the first Mrs. OGrady. "You, husband, must jump into the pot yourself." "Jump into the pot? But then there will be 2 of me as well." "That's right," said the first Mrs. OGrady. "Then we will have a wife for each husband and a husband for each wife. And best of all," she said, "you will have a friend, and at last, so will I." Mr. OGrady thought for a moment. He took a deep breath and jumped headfirst into the pot. His worn leather boots stuck out of the top. Together, the 2 Mrs. OGradys grabbed onto the boots and pulled out Mr. OGrady. Sure enough, now there were 2 more boots sticking out of the top. Both Mrs. OGradys grabbed onto those boots and pulled out another Mr. OGrady, so like the first one that they could scarcely tell the difference. The OGradys, all 4 of them, looked at one another. As they talked, they realized they had a lot in common. Already they felt like the closest of friends. The first Mr. and Mrs. OGrady agreed that the new Mr. and Mrs. OGrady made a very nice couple. Over a candlelight supper of 2 potatoes each, the Mrs. OGradys spoke happily of babies, while Mr. OGradys discussed potato weevils and root rot. Afterward, the first Mrs. OGrady wrapped her arms around the pot and said, "Thank you." Then she said to the others, "Surely we have everything we could possibly want. Let's bury this wonderful pot for some other lucky person to find." So they did, and from that day forward, all of the OGradys lived happily together. They were, they like to say, simply beside themselves with joy. And that's the end. And every time I read this book, I like to think about and ask you, if you could put something into a magic pot that made twins of whatever you put in, what would you choose? I know what Miss Erin would choose.
My cookie.
Her kitty. But that does not surprise you, I know. Think about what you would like to put into a pot. I'll show you how to make twins of art next. See, if you have paint at home, that would be perfect to use for this project. But if you have chalk, that would work too. You know Miss Erin and I love to paint. Remember when we did messy splatter painting? That was the best. This will not be messy. I don't think it will be messy. It shouldn't be. Alright, so there's my paint. I have some paper and a paintbrush. You could use a cotton swab or any other fun paint tool. I'm going to fold the paper in half like I'm making a birthday card. I'll open it up, and on one side of the fold line, I'm going to paint a picture of one thing. Okay, I'm not going to just take my paint and make a design. I'm going to paint a flower, or maybe a house, or a person. Something that there is one of. I'm going to make a flower. My favorite flowers are tiger lilies, so I'll do orange and brown. All right, there's one flower. How can I make it two? Miss Erin, do you have an idea?
I think you might need to fold that piece of paper in half.
What will happen if I do that?
And you need to press it down hard after you
Press
fold
it down
in half.
hard. Use your
Press it
strong
down hard.
fingers. All right, I am pressing. Maybe I'll rub it just a little, but not too much.
Press it.
Okay.
You gotta do harder.
Oh, Miss Erin.
Tell it like it is.
Miss Erin always says what she thinks, and we are glad. Okay. Oh, look at that. We didn't even need a magic pot. You can do that yourself. If you do this project, send me an email picture of your art, and Miss Erin and I will look at it, and it will make us feel very happy. Make us feel like we're kind of at preschool. All right, so there's an art project you can do. Something else, a game. I have 2 cups full of gold coins. You can use cups full of pennies or any other little animals or mini erasers or something you have at home.
M&M's.
M&M's. That would be perfect. So you find a partner, okay, what better partner than Miss Erin, and you each pour out a little bit of whatever's in your cup, okay? And then you think, is this pile of stuff equal to Miss Erin's pile of stuff? In math, equal means the same number as. So to find out how many, we have to count. And when we count, let's move each object. So we'll touch and move and count. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I have 12 coins. Miss Erin, if you have an equal number of coins, how many will you have?
I'd have to have 12 to make it equal.
How are you going to find out?
I'm gonna have to count.
Go for it,
I have
Miss
to
Erin.
move them too.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
No way!
We're that good.
That worked out so perfectly. So that won't always happen, okay? But it's fun to see. See how many times it happens and how many times it's unequal. Another way you could compare to see if they're equal is to stack the coins and to see if one stack is the same tall as the other, or if one is shorter. I bet these will be the same tall. Nope. They still look equal. Right? Play that game with your grown-up or a sibling. That means brother or sister, while you're at home taking care of each other. Hey, one more game for today. It's a building one because I know lots of you have Legos at home or you have other fun building things, some magnet tiles that you got for Christmas. Now this is a sneaky building game. So I want you to take a book and put it between you and your friend or your mom or dad or your brother or sister. I'm going to build a structure, and I want Miss Erin to build the same structure without seeing what I'm building. So that means that I will have to be really, really good at telling her each step that I do to build. So I will say, Miss Erin, I'm going to put 3 yellow blocks and 3 red blocks in a straight across line in a pattern. Now, Miss Erin, I'm going to stack 2 green blocks right on top of the red block. Do you have a question, Miss Erin?
I do. I'm
What?
going to struggle here. Okay, so do you want 2 green blocks stacked on top of 1 red block?
Yes.
Okay. Does it matter which red block I use?
The one on the end
Okay.
of the pattern. If you have questions, ask them, okay? And no peeking. Next, I am going to add a pink block to the yellow block in the middle.
Oh, those were good directions.
Oh, good. Oops. Now I'm going to put a white block on top of the tallest tower in my structure. All right, so I'll stop now. You can make your building as big as you want, but I'm going to lift the book and we'll see if we magically have twin buildings.
See how good my
Do
listening
we? You
skills
already
are.
know, maybe, yes.
We did it.
We did it! And so can you. If you make a really cool structure, send me a picture or draw a picture. Okay? Be proud of what you do at home learning by yourself with your family. All right. So that is today's lesson. Remember to clean up all your stuff when you're done. Okay? Help out mom and dad at home today. And what else, Miss Erin?
Bake some cookies.
Bake some cookies. Miss Erin really, really wants you to play with Play-Doh.
Play with Play-Doh.
Every day.
Yeah.
Lots of Play-Doh. Drawing.
Color. Get your colored pencils
Yes.
out. You got them all. You all got them for Christmas.
Yes, we
Color.
know.
Draw.
So those are our ideas for today, and we will have some more for you tomorrow. Bye, kiddos. We love you.